Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind on Netflix, Season 4.
In her dreams. And I still see you as someone who I could do that with. But, you know, it takes two people for a relationship to work.
Keep talking, I can hear you.
So, I mean...
All right, so under normal circumstances, I might say like, well, you know, she's still listening and maybe she needs that to comfort herself, or it's overwhelming, and maybe that's all true. But the potential here is that she lacks regard for him and his feelings, that she's wanting to laugh at him, and this is her way of refraining from that. I would never think that about other people on these shows. Definitely in the camp of a lot of behaviors that we would see that is immature. If it doesn't mean that she's a bad person, I want to be clear, like when I'm reacting to them, you know, if I had a client like Irina or like Micah, I wouldn't really think much of it. I would just think, well, you know, those are, if they want to work on those things, like if there was a family, say Irina's family came in and they would report or complain that Irina would do things like this, then I wouldn't really be that shocked by it. In therapy, I'm not in that mode. I'm also there to help, and I'm not there to judge. And I've seen a lot worse. Let's just put it that way. So when I react, you know, there are a lot of behaviors that we can be upset about. Certain politicians that want to erode our freedoms, companies that are polluting the environment. These are things to get legit judgmental and angry about. Someone being seemingly immature and hurtful on a reality TV show, it's not great, but it's not the same. And we just have to put that in context and contextualize our reactions. So, and I want to contextualize my reaction, that I'm not saying they're a lost cause. Along those lines, if I did have a client like Irina and I did see this behavior and it was a pattern and I did conceptualize it, say as immaturity or even as some defense of narcissism or maybe even a underlying psychopathy, I don't know, there's a lot of different paths to this. I wouldn't be pessimistic. I would be optimistic, as I usually am. It might take a while, but if these individuals wanted to change things, I wouldn't have any worry about that. I would say, yeah, let's work on it. And I wouldn't be struggling with countertransference. I don't think I'd be trying to hold back a bunch of angry statements toward the person, even if they started treating me this way. If a client did this to me in my office, I would note it, and I would feel like it might be kind of a rejection or something, and it might look a little strange, but I wouldn't go beyond that. I might ask what's going on, or I don't know. I can still have compassion for them. I can still see them as human beings, as worthy people. So I just want to couch everything in that. But it's possible that the immaturity conceptualization is in play, and maybe they would agree with it. I don't know. When you go through tremendous traumas growing up, or you have certain behaviors modeled to you, or there's a lot of chaos growing up, then it could deny you the opportunity to mature, to learn that you are responsible for other people's feelings. You're responsible for doing what you can about other people's feelings. You're not responsible for other people's feelings, but you're responsible for your behavior and your impact on other people, depending. At the very least, as he's pouring his heart out, and the whole conversation is about how she started it. She said that she's basically acknowledging that she's not fully in the relationship and that she's distancing herself. And he is being kind and addressing it and talking about things. And then she puts a pillow over her face. So the possible barrier to taking an action like that would be for her to be like, well, I probably shouldn't do that because that would be pretty mean. Also, it would make me look like a child, because if you heard this behavior, you would think, oh, yeah, that's like a child. I mean, maybe a teenager, but maybe even younger than that. And you would feel perfectly fine in hearing about that. An intense conversation with a 9-year-old, and they stay present, but they put a pillow over their head. You might even see your kids doing something like this. You wouldn't think much of it. You just think, oh, well, they're regulating. But a grown adult, if she wanted to do this, that's fine, but she could say something like, look, I'm sorry, but this is a little intense for me, and I don't want to dismiss this. I feel like I need to stay in this conversation, but I'm really going to have to put this pillow over my head because I just feel like it'll comfort me a little bit. It's kind of what I do. She could say something like that, But as it is, it's just like potentially a big finger in the face, Let's rewind that.
Keep talking.
And the fact that she's smirking the whole time, it's possible she just feels uncomfortable. There's a lot of understandable pathways to this behavior, but the lack of compassion or concern, the callousness, in the direction of cruelty is, especially with the smile, is notable. If I just saw this one behavior, I wouldn't say that, but you look at all the other behaviors and it all just points in a direction. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's talk about self-awareness. I'm often talking about a connection with the self, a connection with who you are, what you want, what you need, this kind of thing, and how for some people, since they weren't attuned to enough as a child, they don't have a strong connection with the self, and therefore they have to go through a lot of therapy to get in connection with the self. But really, I don't know anyone who doesn't cut themselves off from their needs. None of us were 100% attuned to 100% of the time. And of course, that's where therapy can help everybody. And as a therapist, I've witnessed clients discover mind-blowing aspects of themselves that really helped them in their lives. Well, that's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery wherever you are. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient and flexible to your schedule. So discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
Because you're not wrong about all those things.
If you don't find me physically attractive, if I'm not your type, and you don't think we're going to be able to get over that, then I don't think we should go forward any further.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways of looking at this. You could say that she is paralyzed with the worry that she's going to hurt his feelings or whatever. It's probably an element of that. But another way of just framing this is you have an adult talking to a child. If you've ever interacted with teenagers or children, or you have your own kids, there's a lot of conversations that will look like this, where you're having a serious conversation and you have to for one reason or another. Like, say your kid gets in trouble at school. They hit another kid and they get in trouble, and you that evening have a talk with that child, and you're not yelling at the kid, but you're like, hey, let's talk about it. You wouldn't be surprised if the kid would put a pillow over the head, or they would stare down and they wouldn't respond. I guess this points in a direction that she has, who knows, but experiences that were difficult, that were related to authority, chastising her and yelling at her, that could actually, so that is actually another conceptualization I'll add to the list, is that all children, particularly teens, want to be able to push back on authority. It's a way of finding themselves. It's a way of asserting themselves, and a way of defining themselves. It's like they define themselves like, I'm not you, I'm me, and so I reject that. And yeah, it's a normal process. Kids deal with it differently. And if you are denied that, or it's complicated, you're abused, or you are, for example, an opposite side to this is if your parents don't do anything when you push back. That can actually feel like a rejection to the child. Not always, but it can. Anyway, you can have some complicated developmental family of origin process where you have a complicated, incomplete relationship with your own rebellion and your own sense of feeling responsible for your actions and empathy. And so you might get stuck. And I've treated people like this who are 45 years old and they're still, they're definitely an adult and they have a career and they can manage in the world, but they have a streak of their personality and a tendency under stress to have the persona and the mode of a child who is rebelling against authority. They might even have that against their own spouse. Their spouse who is like, hey, you got to call me if you're going to stay out all night, or you have to pick up after yourself, or whatever. Or, I left you alone with the kids and you just left the house. Like, you can't do that. And the individual who has this complex can fall into a mode of, I'm being chastised by my parent unfairly, is the conclusion, and I am just in being quiet and just ignoring what they're saying. And obviously there's a lot of destruction to that. There's a lot of different variants to that, but at the very least, this dynamic, if you just saw this and you didn't know how old someone was and you just saw this little snippet, you would think you have an authority who is trying to have a deeper conversation with a child, and the child is avoiding.
You just got to be real with yourself. If you think that there's something that we can get over, I'm willing to go forward with that. But I've got to see that you're actually all in on this.
And that's good. So he's laying it down. Some people would call this an ultimatum. There are good versions of ultimatums, fair versions, and this is fair. He's like, look, you either show that you're trying, or I don't know, what is he saying exactly?
I'm not going to chase after you.
You're not?
I know that, yeah, I know that's what you want.
No, I don't want that.
But I'm not. Like, I'm not, you're either in it or you're not.
Now, usually on this show, she will give him something to hold on to, and they'll just persist, and they go to the altar, and it ends up the way that we think it will. I'm often thinking, why would you prolong? I mean, the only person that we saw that didn't go to the altar was Shayna and the other guy. What was his name? Kyle was his name? And Shayna just left. And there was a lot of things we could say. Remember when Shayna was the problem? It really just, by comparison, puts things in perspective, right? You think about these other people on Love is Blind that were the hate. Jessica, when you compare what's happening this season to the most villainous people in the past, it just, I mean, maybe you could argue Shake is up there, but I don't think so. I don't think Shake was even close to this. I mean, I don't know, maybe you could argue that. Anyway, so it's interesting to think about the fact that they stay even after there's a lot of indication. So that's what I'm guessing is going to happen. And I don't know, I guess what I'm pulling for is clarification. If Irina is willing to work on it and is willing to face things, I think she does have the capacity to look at things and be honest and understand her responsibility. I think she has some issues around that, but I don't see it as a doomed situation. So I think if she were to put effort, there's a chance. I wouldn't put it high on the probability scale, but there's a chance. So I think, though, what I'm pulling for is clarification for both of them. Why string it out if there's no chance? And I don't know, if I was Zach, I would hope that I would see it for what it looks like, which is that her non-response is louder than bombs. All right, well, let's adjourn there. Everyone, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really, really do.